She was dragged into the throne room in chains for stealing bread. But when the 7-year-old orphan lifted her strange silver eyes to the vampire king, words spilled out that she couldn't control. "My lord, the queen is not pregnant for you." The court fell silent. Queen Aurelia's face was drained of color, and Lord Klaus Fiorelli, the most feared immortal in 3 centuries, rose from his throne with murder in his crimson gaze. What the child said next would ignite a war. The throne room of Draventhorn Hollow was a cathedral of shadows and gold. Clara Chavaria had never seen anything like it. She was only 7 years old, but she understood death when she saw it reflected in the eyes of every vampire courtier watching her. Her wrists hurt from the iron shackles. Her dress was torn and filthy from 3 days in the streets. She'd been caught stealing a loaf of bread from the market, and the guards said children who stole from the king's city faced the king's justice. She didn't mean to speak. She didn't even understand what she was seeing when her eyes, those silver eyes her mother once called gift-touched, looked at the pale, beautiful woman standing beside the throne. Clara saw threads. Glowing threads connecting people like spider silk. The thread between the queen and the king was thin, cold, and political. But the thread running from the queen's barely swollen belly to somewhere far away burned bright with warmth and life and someone else. The words escaped before Clara could stop them. "My lord, the queen is not pregnant for you. The baby belongs to the man from the graveyard." Thunder didn't break. Lightning didn't flash. But something far more terrible happened. Lord Klaus Fiorelli went completely still, and the temperature in the throne room dropped until Clara could see her own breath. The queen's hand flew to her stomach. A gasp rippled through the assembled court, and in that frozen moment, Clara realized she'd just said something that should have stayed secret forever. The king's voice, when it finally came, was soft as a grave. "Take them both to the dungeons." Clara's knees hit the marble floor hard enough to bruise. The guards had thrown her down like a sack of grain, and the iron chains binding her wrists rattled as she tried to catch herself. She didn't cry. Crying hadn't helped when her parents were executed. It wouldn't help now. The throne room stretched out before her like something from a nightmare made of gold and shadows. Chandeliers dripping with crystals cast fractured light across walls lined with tapestries depicting battles she was too young to understand. And everywhere, standing along the columns, seated in the galleries, clustered near the throne, were vampires. Their eyes gleamed red and hungry in the candlelight, tracking her every trembling breath. "Clara Chavaria," a voice announced from somewhere above her. "Age 7. Orphaned. Charged with theft of bread and apples from the king's market." She forced herself to look up. The throne sat on a dais of black stone, carved with symbols that seemed to writhe when she wasn't looking directly at them. And sitting there, draped in midnight velvet and wearing a crown that looked like it was forged from frozen darkness, was Lord Klaus Fiorelli. He was nothing like the monster from the street stories. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. Sharp, cold, and deadly. His skin was pale as winter moonlight, his hair silver white and falling past his shoulders. But his eyes were the color of fresh blood, and when they locked onto hers, Clara felt something inside her chest crack open like an egg. The world exploded into light. Threads. Thousands of threads, glowing like spider silk dipped in starlight. Connecting every person in the room to everyone else. Thin threads, thick threads. Threads that pulsed with color. Red for blood relation, gold for loyalty, silver for... Clara gasped. The thread connecting Klaus to the woman standing beside his throne was barely there at all. A gossamer strand of cold blue that spoke of duty and nothing more. But Queen Aurelia, because Clara somehow knew that's who she was, had another thread running from her belly. It stretched away through the walls, beyond the castle, burning bright orange with passion and life and love, connecting to someone far away. "The child is staring," someone whispered. "She's simple-minded, probably." But Clara wasn't simple. She was seeing something no one else could see, and the truth of it was so bright, it burned. The queen was pregnant. Everyone could see that from the slight swell beneath her elegant gown. But the baby— "My lord," Clara heard herself say, her voice small but carrying in the sudden silence. "The queen is not pregnant for you. The baby belongs to the man from the graveyard." Time stopped. Queen Aurelia's face went from porcelain pale to ash gray. Her hand flew to her stomach as if to protect what lay within. The court erupted, gasps, shouts, the scrape of chairs as nobles rose to their feet. Someone screamed for order. But Klaus didn't move. He sat frozen on his throne, those crimson eyes locked on Clara. Then slowly, so slowly it made her want to run, they slid to his wife. "Aurelia," he said softly, and the single word carried more threat than any scream. "My lord, The queen's voice cracked. "She's a child." "She doesn't know. Does she lie?" Klaus rose, and the temperature plummeted. Frost crept across the marble floor toward Clara's knees. "Does she lie?" Aurelia opened her mouth, closed it, her eyes filled with tears that she didn't let fall. And in her silence, she condemned herself. "Guards," Klaus said, his voice eerily calm. "Take the queen to the dungeons, and the child as well." The throne room descended into chaos. Courtiers shouted. Some called for the queen's immediate execution. Others demanded proof. Clara tried to understand what was happening, but her gift, that terrible, wonderful thing that had just awakened inside her, was showing her too much. Every thread in the room pulsed with emotion. Rage, fear, excitement, ambition. Then she saw something that made her blood freeze. A woman in dark emerald silk stood near one of the pillars. Beautiful, composed, with sharp cheekbones and calculating eyes. "Arabella Santorini," Clara's gift whispered, though she didn't know how she knew the name. The king's most trusted advisor. But the threads connecting Arabella to Klaus were tangled with threads reaching somewhere else, splitting her loyalty like a forked river. As guards seized both Clara and the queen, Arabella turned and slipped away through a side door that most people probably didn't even know existed. Clara's vision dimmed, the threads faded. Her gift released her as suddenly as it had gripped her, and she collapsed against the guard, dragging her toward the dungeon stairs. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Klaus Fiorelli's face, a mask of rage barely containing something that might have been heartbreak. Above the castle, storm clouds gathered. And in a fortress built in a graveyard miles away, a sealed letter landed in the hands of a man who'd been waiting 3 years for this exact message. "It has begun." The letter arrived at midnight, carried by a raven with eyes too intelligent to be natural. It landed on the stone table where Julius DeLuca sat studying maps by candlelight, dropped the sealed parchment, and disappeared into the darkness beyond the broken cathedral windows. Julius opened it with steady hands, read 3 words, and closed his eyes. It has begun. What is it? Lucian Galley appeared in the doorway, always alert, always armed. His hand rested on the sword at his hip, a habit from decades of surviving in a world where vampires like Klaus Fiorelli hunted resistors like them for sport. Klaus knows. Julius set the letter down carefully, as if it might explode. About the child. The fortress erupted. Within minutes, the war room filled with resistance fighters, former nobles who'd fled Klaus's purges, human sympathizers, vampires who believed their kind had grown too cruel. They crowded around the table, shouting over each other, their voices echoing off the vaulted ceiling of what had once been a cathedral before Fenwick Stonebarrow became a city of graves. "This is it!" someone shouted. "Klaus will be humiliated before his entire court. His authority is broken. The nobles will turn on him like wolves. We should march now while he's weak. Enough." Julius's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The room fell silent. He stood, and even in the dim candlelight, he was striking. Dark-haired where Klaus was silver, warm-eyed where Klaus was cold, but carrying the same aura of power that marked all ancient vampires. You celebrate as if this is a victory. It's not. It's a catastrophe. Lucian's eyes narrowed. The child is yours. It wasn't a question. Julius met his second-in-command's gaze and didn't flinch. Yes. The revelation hit differently than Julius expected. Some faces showed shock, others showed calculation. Lucian showed something closer to suspicion. How long? Lucian asked quietly. 3 years. Julius turned back to the maps, but he wasn't seeing them anymore. He was seeing her. Aurelia, the first time she'd appeared at the graveyard gates, desperate and alone, begging for help escaping a marriage that had become a gilded cage. She came to me seeking sanctuary. I offered her something else. The memory surfaced unbidden. Aurelia in the moonlight, her hair unbound, wearing a simple cloak instead of her queenly silks. He doesn't love me, she'd whispered. I'm a trophy, a political alliance. And I'm so tired of being cold. Julius had known it was dangerous. He'd known it was exactly the kind of leverage Klaus would destroy entire kingdoms to prevent. But when she'd looked at him with those desperate, hopeful eyes, he'd been lost. Stay, he'd told her. Just for tonight. Let me show you what warmth feels like. That night became 100 nights. Stolen moments between wars. Secret meetings in abandoned places. And somewhere along the way, duty became desire. And desire became something neither of them had names for. Then Aurelia found the prophecy. She'd brought him a book stolen from Klaus's forbidden library, its pages yellow with age, written in a language only the eldest vampires could read. Julius translated it aloud while she listened, her hand already resting on her still flat belly. When the red death rises and kingdoms fall, only a child born of rival bloodlines can stem the tide or unleash damnation complete. The crimson plague, Aurelia had breathed. The stories are true, and our child could save everyone. Julius had looked at her then, really looked at her, and wondered if he'd ever truly known her at all. Or destroy everything. You used her. Lucian's voice dragged Julius back to the present. The war room had gone quiet, everyone watching their leader with new eyes. You needed a child of prophecy to legitimize your claim to Klaus's throne, and she was convenient. I loved her, Julius said, but even to his own ears, it sounded like a defense rather than a truth. Did you? Lucian stepped closer. Or did you love what she represented? The humiliation of your enemy. The fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. A weapon against Klaus wrapped in flesh and promises. Julius wanted to argue, wanted to rage that Lucian didn't understand, that no one understood what it was like to hold someone who'd been starved of affection for decades, to be the warmth in someone's endless winter. But doubt was a poison, and Lucian had just injected it straight into his heart. We march at dawn, someone suggested. Save the queen. Save the child. Strike while Klaus is vulnerable. No. Julius's voice was cold now, calculated. Every head turned toward him in surprise. We wait. Wait. Lucian's hand tightened on his sword hilt. Julius, if Klaus executes her, he won't. Not immediately. Julius traced a finger along the map, marking distances, calculating time. Klaus is methodical. He'll investigate, interrogate, search for conspirators, and while he's looking inward at his own court, tearing apart his own foundation, we'll be preparing. Let him weaken himself. Let his nobles turn on each other. Let him bleed from wounds he inflicts himself. The room was silent now, but it was a different silence, uncomfortable, uncertain. And Aurelia? Lucian asked softly. You'll let her suffer to serve your strategy? Julius met his eyes. She knew the risks. We both did. This is bigger than one person's comfort, bigger than love. He picked up the letter again, Arabella's handwriting elegant and damning. If the prophecy is real, if the Crimson Plague is truly returning, then we need to be smart, not sentimental. The child is what matters now. Everything else is secondary. He didn't see the looks his fighters exchanged. Didn't notice how some of them stepped back, as if seeing him clearly for the first time and not liking what they saw. But Lucian saw, and Lucian remembered every word. Outside, the graveyard stretched in all directions, thousands of markers standing silent witness. And somewhere in those graves, something ancient stirred, responding to a prophecy spoken aloud. To blood spilled and children conceived, and the wheels of fate grinding forward, whether anyone wanted them to or not. Julius DeLuca sat back down at his maps, alone now in the room he'd cleared with cold calculation. And he told himself it was love that made him wait. He almost believed it. The dungeons beneath Draventhorn Hollow were older than the castle itself, carved from living rock by the first vampires who'd claimed this territory centuries before Klaus was even born. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. The air tasted of stone and despair. Klaus stood outside Aurelia's cell, watching her through the iron bars. She sat on the stone bench with her hands folded over her belly, still wearing the silver gown she'd worn to court, now stained with dungeon filth. Her composure infuriated him almost as much as her betrayal. I could kill you, he said finally. His voice echoed off the walls. Slowly, creatively, I have 3 centuries of experience in making traitors suffer. I know. Aurelia didn't look up. You've never let me forget what you're capable of. Klaus's hand tightened on the bars hard enough to bend the iron. How long? 3 years. 3 years. He laughed, but it was a sound like breaking glass. 3 years of lies. 3 years of making a fool of me before my entire kingdom. And with him, of all the vampires in existence, you chose Julius DeLuca. I chose warmth, Aurelia said quietly. I chose someone who looked at me like I was more than a dynasty, more than a womb. The words hit harder than Klaus expected. He'd married Aurelia 50 years ago for her bloodline, for the alliance her family brought, for the legitimacy she added to his rule. Had he ever pretended otherwise? Had he ever offered her more than duty and distant respect? You still haven't answered my question. Klaus forced his voice to ice. Why him? Aurelia finally looked up, and her eyes held something he'd never seen before. Defiance mixed with desperate hope. Because of this. She reached beneath her gown and pulled out a folded piece of parchment, ancient and fragile. She pushed it through the bars. Klaus took it, frowning, unfolded it, and froze. The text was in Old Tongue, the language of the first vampires, written in fading ink that still glowed faintly with residual magic. He'd seen this document before, decades ago, filed away in his archives under mythology and superstition, dismissed as the paranoid ramblings of dying elders. When the Red Death rises and kingdoms fall, only a child born of rival bloodlines can stem the tide or unleash damnation complete. The Crimson Plague, Klaus breathed. It's returning. Aurelia stood, moving to the bars. Her voice urgent now. The signs are everywhere if you'd look. Villages going silent on the borders. Reports of vampires turning to ash from within, their blood crystallizing like rubies. The same symptoms described in the oldest texts. Our kind is dying, Klaus, and you've been too busy consolidating power to notice. Klaus's mind raced. The border reports. The strange illnesses he'd dismissed as isolated incidents, as weakness in lesser bloodlines. What if... So you decided to fulfill an ancient prophecy, he said slowly, by bedding my greatest enemy and conceiving his child. Our child, Aurelia corrected. Mine and Julius's, born of rival bloodlines, born of genuine love, not political arrangement. That's what the prophecy requires. Both. Connection through blood and through choice. Why didn't you come to me? The question escaped before Klaus could stop it, and he hated how it sounded. Almost vulnerable, almost hurt. Aurelia's expression softened with something that might have been pity. Because you would have seen it as duty, not love. You would have approached it like a breeding program, calculated and cold. The prophecy requires both passion and purpose, Klaus. And we haven't had passion in decades. We both know it. The truth of it was a blade between his ribs. Klaus turned away from the cell, his hands clenched into fists. Part of him wanted to rage, to tear the dungeon apart stone by stone. But another part, a part he'd thought long dead, wondered if she was right. If he'd become so focused on power that he'd forgotten what it meant to actually live. The child could save us all, Aurelia said softly, or destroy everything. But at least it's a chance. At least I tried to do something other than wait for extinction. Klaus didn't answer. He walked away, leaving her alone in the darkness, the prophecy clutched in his hand like a condemnation. 3 cells down, Clara Chavarria huddled in the corner, trying to make herself as small as possible. The dungeon terrified her. The darkness, the cold, the scratching sounds that might have been rats, or might have been something worse. She'd been crying, but her tears had run out hours ago. The door opened. Lamplight spilled in, and Clara scrambled back against the wall. Easy, child! The woman who entered was beautiful, with sharp features and kind eyes, carrying a tray of bread and water. I'm Arabella. I serve the king. I've brought you food. Clara's stomach growled traitorously. She hadn't eaten since before her arrest. But something in her, that same instinct that had made her gift awaken, screamed danger. I'm not hungry, she lied. Arabella smiled and set the tray down anyway. You're frightened. I understand. What you saw in the throne room, your gift, it must be terrifying not to understand it. I don't know what you mean. The threads. Arabella knelt down, bringing herself to Clara's eye level. The connections you see between people, the bloodlines. It's rare, child, ancient, and very, very valuable. Clara's breath caught. How did she know? Arabella reached out slowly, offering her hand. Let me help you. Let me teach you to control it before it destroys you. Clara looked at the offered hand, and her gift, unbidden, unwanted, surged to life. The threads appeared again, glowing in the darkness. Arabella had so many threads connecting her to so many people, but two burned brighter than all the others. One stretched back toward the castle above, pulsing with gold and crimson. Loyalty and love twisted together, pointing toward Klaus. The other stretched away through walls and distance, silver and desperate, pointing toward somewhere far away, toward the graveyard, toward Julius. You love both of them, Clara whispered, the truth spilling out before she could stop it. You're the broken thread. Arabella's mask cracked. For just a moment, shock flashed across her face, genuine, unguarded surprise that a child could see what she'd hidden from everyone. Then it was gone, replaced by something calculating. She smiled. Clever girl. Then she stood, took the tray, and left Clara alone in the darkness, with knowledge that would get her killed if anyone else discovered it. The door locked with a sound like a coffin closing, and Clara understood, finally, that truth was the most dangerous gift of all. The first report came at dawn. A messenger stumbled into the throne room, his clothes torn, his eyes wild with terror that had nothing to do with Klaus's presence. He collapsed at the base of the dais, gasping words that made every vampire in the court go still. Ashenvale, the entire village, they're gone. Klaus descended the throne steps with predatory grace. Gone? Explain. Dead, my lord. All of them. But not from attack. Not from anything we understand. The messenger's hands shook. They turned to ash, from the inside out. Their blood, it crystallized, like rubies. And they screamed of fire even as ice spread through their veins. The court erupted in whispers. Klaus silenced them with a look. By midday, 3 more reports arrived. By evening, 7. Villages along the border territories, all afflicted by the same mysterious death. Vampires who'd survived centuries, who'd endured wars and persecution and the slow march of human progress, dying in agony as their own blood betrayed them. The Crimson Plague, the Red Death, the extinction event that had nearly wiped out their kind 1,000 years ago, dismissed by every modern vampire as mythology. It had returned. Klaus stood in his war room, surrounded by maps now marked with red crosses indicating death. Each cross represented dozens of lives, hundreds, and the pattern was spreading like blood and water, creeping closer to Draventhorn Hollow with every passing hour. We evacuate the border territories, one advisor suggested. Quarantine the infected. It doesn't spread through contact, another interrupted. The reports are clear. Vampires in the same household, one dies while another remains untouched. There's no logic to it. Then we're helpless. The first advisor's voice cracked. If we can't understand it, can't predict it. Enough. Klaus's word was law. He turned from the maps, his mind racing through possibilities, calculations, the cold mathematics of survival, and kept returning to one impossible variable, Aurelia's prophecy. Only a child born of rival bloodlines can stem the tide. He dismissed it, called it superstition, but now, with death spreading across his kingdom, Klaus couldn't afford the luxury of skepticism. "Summon the court," he commanded. "All nobles, immediate attendance." The throne room filled within the hour. Klaus stood before them, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. His face a mask of controlled fury. The assembled vampires whispered nervously, sensing something had changed in their king. "The Crimson Plague has returned," Klaus announced, and the whispers died. "The ancient death we thought myth is killing our kind by the hundreds, and it will reach Draventhorn within days." Panic rippled through the court. Klaus let it build for a moment, then continued. "Queen Aurelia discovered a prophecy suggesting our salvation lies with the child she carries. I have decided not to execute her." The shocked gasps were immediate. Klaus spoke over them. "Yet, if she speaks truth, the child may be our only hope. But prophecy or not, the man who dishonored this court will answer for it." He let his gaze sweep across every face. "We march on Fenwick Stonebarrow. We bring Julius de Luca before this throne, and we verify whether his bastard can save us, or if we die taking vengeance. Either way, I will have satisfaction." No one dared speak. Klaus nodded once, sharply. "Prepare the army. We leave at first dark." As the court emptied, Klaus gave one more order. "Bring me the child, the one with the silver eyes." Clara was dragged from her cell, blinking against torchlight that felt bright as noon after days in darkness. She was brought to a chamber she'd never seen. Cold, clinical, lined with tables, and on those tables lay bodies. Vampire bodies, but wrong. Their skin had cracked like shattered porcelain, revealing crystallized blood beneath that glittered like terrible jewels. Their faces were frozen in expressions of agony, mouths open in screams that would never end. "Look at them." Klaus's voice came from behind her. Clara spun, finding him standing in the doorway. His crimson eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run. "Use your gift. Tell me what you see." "I can't. I don't know how." "You revealed my wife's betrayal with a glance. You saw truth no one else could see." Klaus moved closer, and Clara pressed back against the table, feeling the corpse behind her. "These vampires are dead. I need to know why. I need to know if there's a pattern. And you're going to show me." Clara's breath came in gasps. She looked at the bodies, not wanting to see, not wanting her gift to activate. But Klaus's presence was overwhelming, his will pressing against hers like a physical weight. Her silver eyes began to glow. The threads appeared, but these were different, wrong. The dead vampires had threads that extended from their bodies, but they were withered, blackened, like plants killed by frost. And they all shared something. The threads were uniform, unbroken, stretching back through generations without variation. "They're pure," Clara whispered, understanding flooding through her. "Their blood, their families, they never mixed with anything else. Just vampire to vampire to vampire. going back forever. Klaus went very still. And the survivors? Clara looked at a body in the corner, a vampire who died in the same village but hours after the others, giving them time to document his death. His threads were different, tangled, mixed. Human ancestry somewhere in his line, or something else supernatural. He lasted longer, Clara said, because he wasn't pure. The sickness. It wants the pure ones first. The silence that followed was absolute. Klaus stared at the bodies, at the evidence of his own coming death, written in crystallized blood and cracked skin. Because if purity was vulnerability and mixture was survival. "You're old," Clara said, her voice small. "Your bloodline is pure. That means I'm dying." Klaus's voice was soft, almost wondering. "That means every vampire of ancient lineage, every noble bloodline, everyone who's bragged about their purity for centuries, we're the plague's primary targets." He looked down at Clara, and for the first time, she saw something other than cold rage in his eyes. She saw fear. "And the child Aurelia carries," Klaus continued, his mind racing ahead. "Conceived between rival bloodlines, mixed between ancient enemies. Might be immune," Clara finished. "Or the cure. Or both." Klaus laughed then. But it was the sound of a man confronting his own cosmic joke. He'd spent centuries believing purity was strength. That mixture weakened their kind, that maintaining bloodlines was preserving their heritage. And all along, diversity had been their only path to survival. "Prepare the child for travel," Klaus ordered the guards. "She comes with us to Fenwick Stonebarrow. If Julius DeLuca's bastard is our salvation, I want her eyes to verify it." He turned to leave, then paused. "And send word to the Queen. Tell her the prophecy was right. Tell her I'm listening now." Clara watched him go, still standing among the dead, her gift fading as exhaustion took her. Outside, the first cases of crimson plague appeared within Draventhorn Hollow itself. The ancient city, seat of vampire power for 300 years, had been breached by an enemy that couldn't be fought with swords or strategy. The clock was ticking, and salvation, if it existed at all, grew in the womb of a traitor queen. Arabella Santorini had been lying for so long, she sometimes forgot what truth felt like. She stood in the shadows of Klaus's war room, watching him plan his march on Fenwick Stonebarrow with the cold precision that had made him the most feared vampire in 3 centuries. Maps, supply lines, attack formations. He approached war like a surgeon approaches a body, methodical, unflinching, ready to cut away what was diseased. She'd loved him for that once, for his certainty, for the way he never doubted, never hesitated. She'd been his advisor for 40 years, his confidant for 30, and his secret lover for the last 10, filling the space Aurelia had left cold between them. But she'd also been feeding information to Julius DeLuca for 15. The contradiction had seemed manageable once. She could love Klaus while believing Julius was right. She could be loyal to a man while betraying his kingdom for a better future. She'd told herself she was building bridges, preparing for a transition of power that would save lives rather than end them. Now, with the Crimson Plague spreading and Klaus preparing to march into a war that might kill them all, Arabella understood she'd been lying to herself most of all. "The child," Klaus said, without looking up from his maps. "She'll travel with us. Her gift might be the only way to verify if the prophecy is genuine." Arabella's breath caught. Clara, locked in the dungeons, knowing what she knew about Arabella's divided loyalties, The girl was dangerous, not because she meant to be, but because she couldn't help seeing truth. "My lord," Arabella said carefully, "perhaps the child should remain here. She's fragile. The march could—" "I didn't ask your opinion." Klaus finally looked at her, and something in his gaze made her blood run cold. Suspicion? Or just exhaustion? "I need her eyes. If Julius's bastard is our salvation, I want her to tell me before I decide whether to kill him or negotiate." He turned back to his maps, dismissing her. Arabella bowed and left, her mind racing. Clara couldn't go to war. Couldn't be there when Klaus and Julius faced each other, because the child would see everything, would speak truth at the worst possible moment, and the fragile possibility of cooperation would shatter into bloodshed. Arabella made her decision in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The child had to reach Julius first. She moved through Draventhorn's passages like smoke, using routes only the oldest residents knew. The guard rotations, the blind corners, the places where Klaus's surveillance was weakest, because he'd never imagined someone this close to him would betray him. Clara's cell was guarded by two vampires Arabella had hand-picked decades ago. They stepped aside at her approach without question. "The king wants her moved," Arabella lied smoothly. "Preparations for travel. I'm to take her to more secure chambers." They believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was Arabella Santorini. She was trusted. Clara looked up as the cell door opened, her silver eyes too knowing for a 7-year-old. "You're going to help me escape?" Not a question. The child saw too much. "Yes." Arabella knelt, unlocking Clara's chains with keys that shouldn't have been in her possession. "There are people waiting outside the city. They'll take you somewhere safe." "To Julius." Clara's voice was flat. "To the graveyard king, because you think I need to be there for the prophecy." "You're too clever for your own good, child." "And you're too broken." Clara's eyes began to glow, that terrible silver light that meant her gift was activating. "You think you're saving everyone, but you're actually serving someone else." Arabella froze. "What?" "There's a shadow behind both kings." Clara's voice had gone distant, dreamy, the way it did when she was seeing things others couldn't. "I can see his thread. It's old, so old it's almost black. Older than Klaus, older than Julius. And it connects to you too. To everyone. He's been pulling strings for so long you can't even see them anymore." "Clara, what are you—" "He wants the baby." The child's eyes locked onto Arabella's, and the advisor saw her own reflection in those silver mirrors. "Everything that's happened, the affair, the prophecy, the plague, he made it happen. And you're helping him." The words hit like a blade between ribs. Arabella wanted to argue, wanted to say the child was wrong, was confused, was seeing connections that didn't exist. But doubt was a poison, and Clara had just injected it directly into her certainty. "Who?" Arabella whispered. "Who is he?" Clara opened her mouth to answer, and the alarm bells began to ring. Someone had discovered the cell empty. Guards flooded the dungeons, their boots thundering against stone. Arabella made a split-second choice. She shoved Clara toward the secret passage she'd planned to use. Toward the network of rebels waiting beyond the walls. "Run!" she commanded. "Don't stop until you reach Fenwick Stonebarrow. Tell Julius—" But what could she tell him? That they were all pawns? That someone else was orchestrating everything? Tell him to protect the child. Both children. Whatever happens. Clara ran. Arabella turned to face the guards flooding toward her, knowing she'd just condemned herself. Klaus appeared at the end of the corridor, and the look on his face, That moment of complete understanding, of heartbreak giving way to rage, would haunt her forever. You, he breathed. It was you, all along. Arabella didn't try to deny it. Couldn't. The evidence was literally running away through secret passages only she knew existed. I loved you, Klaus said, and the softness of it was worse than any scream. I trusted you above everyone, above even myself sometimes, and you. I love you still. The words escaped before she could stop them, and they were true, horribly true. But loving you and believing in your rule are different things. I thought. Take her. Klaus's voice had gone cold, dead, empty of everything that had made it human. Lock her in the highest tower. I want her to watch what happens next. I want her to see exactly what her betrayal costs. Guards seized her. Arabella didn't struggle. What would be the point? She'd made her choice. Set things in motion that couldn't be stopped. She just hoped Clara had been wrong about the shadow. Clara reached Fenwick Stone Barrow 3 days later, delivered by Arabella's network of rebels and sympathizers. She arrived dirty, exhausted, but alive, and the resistance erupted in confusion. Julius stood in the cathedral that served as his throne room, staring at the child who'd exposed his affair and holding the letter, explaining how she'd escaped. His expression was unreadable. A gift, one fighter said. Klaus's advisor sends us the very weapon that started this war. It's a trap. Or an opportunity, another argued. The child can verify the prophecy, can see bloodlines. She's exactly what we need. Lucian Galley stepped forward, his hand resting on his sword as always. He looked from Clara to Julius, his eyes hard with suspicion that had been growing for days. Or, Lucian said quietly, we ask ourselves why Klaus's most trusted advisor would betray him now. Why she'd send us this child at precisely the moment it serves Julius's interests. He turned to face his leader directly. What if Julius planned this from the beginning? The affair, the prophecy, the child? What if you orchestrated all of it? What if you're no better than the tyrant we've been fighting? The cathedral went silent. Every member of the resistance watched Julius, waiting for his response. Some hands drifted toward weapons. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Julius looked at Lucian for a long moment, then at Clara, who stood small and frightened in the center of attention she never wanted. Then at the fighters who'd followed him for decades, whose faith was visibly fracturing. The child stays, Julius said finally, under guard, under observation. And when Klaus arrives, because he will arrive, we'll have answers. It wasn't a denial, and everyone noticed. Lucian's jaw tightened, but he nodded, stepped back, and said nothing more. The resistance, united for so long against a common enemy, began to crack from within, and in the highest tower of Draventhorn Hollow, Arabella watched the army prepare to march. Watched Klaus transform grief into cold fury, and wondered if Clara's warning about the shadow had come too late. Something ancient was moving, and they were all dancing to its tune. The army of Draventhorn Hollow stretched across the valley like a dark sea, thousands of vampires in formation beneath banners that had flown for 3 centuries. Klaus sat astride a black warhorse at their head, armored and crowned, every inch the conqueror. The Crimson Plague had taken 50 more lives in the 3 days since they'd marched, but he'd left half his forces behind to protect the city. What remained was still more than enough to crush the resistance. Across the field, Fenwick Stonebarrow's defenders looked like exactly what they were. rebels cobbled together from deserters, idealists, and the desperate. They held the graveyard fortress, had the advantage of defensive position, but numbers didn't lie. This would be a massacre. Julius stood on the cathedral steps, watching Klaus's army position itself with the precision of a machine built for slaughter. Lucian appeared at his shoulder, armor strapped tight, sword drawn. "We can't win this fight," Lucian said quietly. "Not militarily." "I know. Then what?" "I'm going to talk to him." Julius began removing his armor, piece by piece, letting it clatter to the stone. Gasps rippled through his fighters. "Julius, that's suicide." "Maybe." Julius smiled grimly. "Or maybe it's the only move he won't expect." He walked onto the battlefield alone, unarmed, wearing nothing but the simple black tunic and pants of a common fighter. Klaus's army stirred, uncertain. Archers drew their bows, but Julius kept walking, steady and unafraid, until he stood in the no-man's land between the armies. "Klaus Fiorelli," he called out, his voice carrying across the field. "I request parley, just you and me. Let's talk before we kill each other." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Klaus dismounted with fluid grace and walked forward to meet him, hand resting on his sword hilt. They stopped 10 paces apart, two powerful vampires with centuries between them and an army at each back. "You have nothing to say that I want to hear," Klaus said coldly. "Don't I?" Julius reached up and removed his helmet, the full helm he always wore in battle, the one that concealed his features. "Look at me, brother. Really look." Klaus went absolutely still. The face before him was impossible. Dead. Erased. Banished 200 years ago and declared a traitor whose name would never be spoken again in Draventhorn Hollow. But there was no mistaking those features. The same sharp cheekbones, the same proud bearing, just aged by time and hardship. Julius the compassionate, his younger brother. The one he'd loved and betrayed and exiled and tried to forget. "No," Klaus breathed. "Yes." Julius smiled sadly. "Julius de Luca was a name I took after you stripped away the one I was born with. After you told the world I was dead, rather than admit your own brother saw your cruelty for what it was." The revelation rippled across both armies. Resistance fighters stared at their leader in shock. Klaus's soldiers whispered frantically. The two greatest enemies in the vampire world stood revealed as family. Klaus's mind reeled backward, to that night 2 centuries ago. Julius arguing for peace treaties with humans. Julius advocating for sharing territories, for ending the supremacist policies that kept vampires elevated and everyone else subjugated. Julius gathering support among nobles who were tired of endless war. Julius attempting a coup. "You tried to overthrow me," Klaus said, his voice tight. "I tried to save you from yourself." Julius took a step closer. "I tried to show you that power through fear was a poison. That compassion wasn't weakness. That ruling meant serving, not subjugating. And you couldn't bear it. Couldn't bear that your younger brother might be right. You would have destroyed everything I built. I would have made it better." Julius's composure cracked. "Everything I've built since, every rebellion, every life lost, it's because you couldn't tolerate a different vision. You exiled compassion itself, brother, and now look at us. Your wife came to me not just because she loved me, but because she saw what you've become. cold, tyrannical, more interested in being feared than being right. The words landed like blows. Klaus felt his carefully constructed certainty crumbling, but rage rushed in to fill the gaps. "Don't pretend this is about principle," Klaus snarled. "The affair, the pregnancy, the prophecy, you orchestrated it all. You needed a child of mixed bloodlines to legitimize your claim to my throne, to be the savior king when the Crimson Plague returned. You used Aurelia, used her desperation, her loneliness, her fear of extinction. This was never about love. It was about power." Julius's expression flickered. Just for a moment, guilt and recognition passing across his face before he controlled it. "I loved her, love her still." "But you also needed her." Klaus stepped closer now, voice dropping to something dangerous. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me the prophecy didn't factor into your seduction. Tell me you didn't see an opportunity to create the one weapon that could destroy me. A child born of rival bloodlines, conceived in betrayal, destined to prove that your way was right all along." The silence stretched. Julius opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I can be both," he said finally. "I can love her and see the strategic value. I can want to save our kind and want to claim what you stole from me. The difference between us, Klaus, is that I admit it. I don't pretend my choices are purely righteous. But you've convinced yourself that tyranny is justice, that fear is respect, that—" A scream cut through the air. Both brothers turned. A vampire in Klaus's formation collapsed, convulsing. His skin began to crack, revealing crystalline blood beneath. The Crimson Plague, arriving at the worst possible moment. Then another scream from the resistance side. Then 3 more. Then a dozen. The plague didn't care about armies or strategy or family drama. It killed ancient bloodlines with methodical efficiency, and both sides had plenty of those. Chaos erupted. Soldiers broke formation, rushing to dying comrades. The neat battle lines dissolved into panic as vampires on both sides faced an enemy that couldn't be fought with swords. Klaus and Julius stood frozen in the middle of it all, watching their forces fall apart around them. Everything they'd been arguing about, power, legitimacy, who had the right to rule, suddenly seemed absurd in the face of extinction. "We can kill each other," Klaus said quietly. "Or we can try to survive this." Julius looked at his brother. His enemy, his mirror. The one person in existence who'd known him before all the lies and exiles and centuries of hatred. He saw Klaus truly afraid for the first time in 200 years. "Truce," Julius said. "Temporary. Until we stop the plague." "Truce," Klaus agreed. "Temporary. Then we settle this." They both knew it was a lie. Nothing would ever be settled between them. But lies, sometimes, were all that kept the world from burning. "Your dungeons or mine?" Julius asked with dark humor. "Mine. Aurelia is there, and the child who sees truth." Klaus looked around at the dying soldiers. "We need answers. Fast." Julius nodded. He turned to his resistance, shouted orders for them to stand down, to prepare to march alongside their enemies. Lucian stared at him like he'd gone mad. Klaus did the same. Commanding his forces to accept the resistance as temporary allies. His soldiers looked mutinous, but obeyed. 2 armies, built to destroy each other, would now march together. 2 brothers, separated by 2 centuries of hatred, would work toward the same goal. And both knew that whatever came next would probably destroy them anyway. But at least they'd die trying. The field emptied, leaving only the plague victims behind, crystallized monuments to pride and purity. Above them, storm clouds gathered, and in those clouds, something ancient smiled. Draventhorn Hollow had never seen anything like it. Resistance fighters walking through halls that had executed their kind for centuries. Klaus's nobles forced to share council chambers with rebels they'd hunted. Two armies that should have been killing each other instead worked side by side, united by the simple arithmetic of extinction. The death toll climbed hourly. 300 vampires in the first week. 500 by the second. The Crimson Plague didn't discriminate between loyalist and rebel. It killed based on bloodline purity, and both sides had plenty of ancient lines to burn through. Klaus and Julius stood in the archives, surrounded by texts older than either of them. Scholars from both kingdoms worked frantically, translating prophecies, cross-referencing plague records, searching for anything that might save them. The brothers didn't speak to each other unless necessary. The truce was paper-thin, held together by desperation and nothing more. "Bring the child," Klaus ordered. "The one who sees truth. We need her eyes." Clara was brought up from safer quarters, not the dungeons anymore, but not freedom either. She'd become something stranger, a prisoner elevated to importance by catastrophe. She looked exhausted, thinner than before, her silver eyes too large in her small face. "The Queen," Klaus said without preamble. "I need you to examine her again. Tell us about the child she carries. Tell us everything your gift shows you." Clara nodded mutely and was led to Aurelia's chamber. The Queen sat by the window, her belly noticeably larger now, her hands folded protectively over it. She looked up as Clara entered. And something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or simply the acknowledgement of two people caught in forces beyond their control. "May I?" Clara gestured toward Aurelia's stomach. "Yes." Clara placed her small hands on the swell of life, closed her eyes, and let her gift activate. The silver glow spread from her eyes down through her hands, and she saw. Her eyes snapped open. "There are two babies." The room went silent. Klaus stepped forward. Julius froze mid-breath. Aurelia's face showed shock, then understanding, then something like horror. "Two heartbeats," Clara continued, her voice distant. "Two different bloodlines. One is old, pure, unbroken." She looked at Klaus. "Yours, conceived before the affair. And one is mixed, changed, carrying both old blood and new paths." She turned to Julius. "Yours, conceived during." "Twins," Aurelia breathed. "I'm carrying twins. One from each of you." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Julius staggered back against the wall. Klaus's hands clenched into fists. The scholars exchanged frantic looks, diving back into texts with renewed urgency. "The prophecy!" one of them shouted, holding up a crumbling manuscript. "It says, 'child,' but the original text is ambiguous. It could mean singular or plural in Old Tongue. And here," he traced a passage, "blood of rivals born uses a dual conjugation, not one child, two." "Both children are the prophecy," another scholar confirmed, cross-referencing with a different text. "One represents purity, the old ways, the ancient strength. One represents change, mixed bloodlines, adaptation. Separately, they're incomplete. Together, together." "Their blood can create immunity," Klaus finished, understanding flooding through him. "The plague targets purity because purity is stagnation, but it can't be defeated by mixture alone. That would just dilute what makes us vampire. We need both. Balance." Julius moved to Aurelia's side, knelt beside her. You knew. When you found the prophecy, you knew it required both of us. I suspected, Aurelia whispered. I wasn't certain until the affair had already begun. And then I couldn't stop. Couldn't tell either of you without destroying everything. Tears tracked down her face. I thought I was saving us. Maybe I just made everything worse. The ritual, a scholar interrupted, his voice grim. There's more. The blood of the children can create a cure, but extracting it requires. He hesitated, looking at the brothers, at Aurelia, at Clara. It requires sacrifice, life for life. The text is clear. How much life? Klaus demanded. It doesn't specify, but the original plague was stopped when... The scholar's face went pale. When the mother of the prophesied children gave herself to the ritual. Her life, containing both bloodlines, created the first cure. The silence was absolute. Aurelia's hands moved protectively over her belly. Julius's face drained of color. Klaus turned away, his shoulders rigid with tension he couldn't release. Before anyone could speak, the door burst open. Lucian Galley strode in, sword drawn, his face twisted with betrayal and rage. You knew! He spat at Julius. All of it! The twins! The prophecy! You orchestrated everything, manipulated everyone, and for what? To be the Savior King? To fulfill some ancient text while people die? Lucian, put down the sword, Julius began. No! Lucian lunged. The blade flashed toward Julius's heart. Klaus moved faster than sight. His hand caught Lucian's wrist, twisted, and there was a wet, terrible sound as bone broke. Julius rolled aside. Guards flooded in, but the damage was done, not to Julius, but to the fragile trust binding the resistance together. Lucian collapsed, held by guards, his broken arm hanging at an impossible angle, but his eyes burned with righteous fury even through the pain. You became what you fought against, he said to Julius, voice shaking. You talk about compassion, about a better way, but you're just Klaus with different words. You used her. He looked at Aurelia, his expression shifting to something like pity. And she was never even yours to love. Oh. None of this was real. She belongs to the shadow. You all do. What shadow? Klaus demanded, gripping Lucian's collar. What are you talking about? Lucian laughed, a broken, bloody sound. You think you're in control? You think you're the players in this game? You're pieces, all of you. The affair, the prophecy, the plague. He orchestrated all of it. And you're so busy fighting each other, you can't even see the hand moving you across the board. Who? Julius grabbed Lucian's other arm, ignoring his former friend's wince of pain. Who is he? I don't know his name. Lucian's voice was fading now, shock setting in. But I saw his messages to Arabella. Ancient correspondence, instructions going back decades. He planted the prophecy texts. He reawakened the plague. He made sure Aurelia would find that book. Made sure you two would, he coughed, blood flecking his lips. Would create exactly what he needs. The twins. He needs the twins for something worse than the plague. Clara stepped forward, her silver eyes glowing. I tried to tell Arabella. I saw his thread. Old. So old it's almost black. Older than any vampire should be. Lucian's gaze found her, and he smiled sadly. The child sees it. Of course she does. Truth sight always sees what we refuse to acknowledge. His eyes closed. Find him. Stop him. Before the ritual. Because whatever he's planning, it requires the sacrifice to happen. He's been waiting centuries for this moment. Don't give him... His words cut off. His chest stilled. Lucian Galley, loyal revolutionary, fierce second in command, died speaking a warning no one wanted to believe. The room erupted into chaos. Resistance fighters demanded answers. Klaus's guards attempted to restore order. But Klaus and Julius just stared at each other over Lucian's body, a horrible understanding passing between them. They'd been manipulated. Both of them. All of them. And somewhere, something ancient was waiting for them to complete a ritual that would do far more than cure a plague. Find Arabella, Klaus ordered. Bring her here. Now. If anyone knows who this shadow is, it's her. As guards rushed to obey, Clara looked down at Lucian's body and whispered something only Aurelia heard. He's not done with us yet. The shadow. I can still see his threads. They're tightening. Aurelia pulled Clara close, her hands protective over her belly where two children, two pieces of an ancient puzzle, grew toward a destiny none of them understood. Outside, the plague continued its methodical harvest, and somewhere deep beneath the oldest graveyard in Fenwick's stone barrow, something stirred in darkness, patient and inevitable as death itself. The pieces were almost in place. Arabella stood in chains before the assembled council, her face gaunt from days in the tower watching death spread below. But her eyes were sharp, focused, as Klaus held up the letters Lucian had mentioned. Correspondence found hidden in her chambers, written in a hand so ancient the ink had faded to rust. Marius Guerra, Klaus read aloud, and several of the oldest vampires in the room went pale. That's who you've been taking orders from, a name that shouldn't exist. A vampire who died 400 years ago. He didn't die, Arabella said quietly. He transcended, or tried to, and I didn't know, not at first. He approached me decades ago as a fellow believer in reform, fed me ideology, gave me purpose. By the time I realized he was using me, I was too deep to escape. Julius leaned forward. Tell us everything. The story Arabella told was a nightmare generations in the making. Marius Guerra had been one of the first vampires, created in an age when magic flowed more freely, and the boundaries between life and death were thinner. He'd lived for over 1,000 years, accumulating power and knowledge until even vampiric immortality wasn't enough. He wanted more. To become unkillable by any means. To transcend the weaknesses that made vampires vulnerable to sunlight, to stakes, to the various deaths their kind could suffer. He'd discovered a ritual, ancient, forbidden, requiring the blood of children born from prophecy, specifically twins conceived between rival bloodlines during a time of great dying. He disappeared 400 years ago, one of the elder scholars confirmed, pulling records from the archives. The official story was that he was destroyed attempting forbidden magic, but there were rumors he'd succeeded in something, that he'd gone dormant, waiting. Waiting for what? Klaus demanded. For all the pieces to align, Arabella said. He needed a plague, the Crimson Plague specifically, because its magic is tied to bloodline purity. He needed rival vampire rulers whose bloodlines were ancient enough to matter. He needed them to conceive children together under the right circumstances. And he needed everyone, including me, to believe we were acting of our own free will. Clara stepped forward, her silver eyes glowing. He planted the prophecy texts, made sure they'd be found, made sure Aurelia would see them. Yes. Arabella's voice cracked. I thought I was helping Aurelia escape a loveless marriage. Thought I was supporting Julius's revolution. But every conversation I had with her, every piece of advice I gave, he'd prepared me for it. Gave me the exact words that would push her toward Julius. I was his puppet, and I never even saw the strings. And the plague? Julius's voice was tight. He reawakened it? Using forbidden magic, yes. The plague was never truly gone. It was dormant, waiting to be called. Marius performed the ritual 6 months ago, timing it perfectly so that the plague would peak just as the twins were ready to be born. Arabella looked at Aurelia, who sat pale and trembling. He needs them, both of them. Their blood, shed during the ritual, will grant him power beyond anything that exists. He'll become immune to all vampire weaknesses, unkillable, a god among our kind. And the cure? Klaus asked. The immunity their blood could create? A lie, or rather, a partial truth. The twins' blood could cure the plague, but only if used in the correct ritual. Marius's version perverts the magic, uses it for power instead of healing. If he completes his ritual, the plague continues, only he survives, and he rules over whatever's left of us. The room erupted. Voices shouted over each other. Some called for immediate action. Others demanded to know why Arabella hadn't spoken sooner. Klaus let them rage for a moment, then silenced them with a gesture. Where is he? Clara answered before Arabella could speak. I can find him. His thread is so strong now, so close to completion. He's beneath the graveyard, beneath Fenwick's stone barrow, deeper than anyone's excavated. There are tunnels down there older than recorded history. Julius's face went grim. I've felt something in those depths, avoided exploring too far. I thought it was just ancient crypts. It's his stronghold, Arabella confirmed. He's been there the entire time, beneath your feet, watching everything unfold according to his design, waiting for the moment to take what he created. Klaus stood, decision made. We assault it, combined forces, every vampire who can still fight. We destroy him before the twins are born, before he can complete his ritual. The twins are the only leverage we have, one advisor argued. If we don't give them to him, he'll release the full force of the plague. He's going to do that anyway, Julius interrupted. Once he has what he wants. Men like him, like us. He glanced at Klaus. Don't leave loose ends. He'll take the twins, complete his ritual, and let everyone else burn. Klaus nodded grimly. We march immediately. Arabella, you'll guide us. Clara, you'll track him. And we'll need... A scream cut through his words. Aurelia doubled over, her hands flying to her belly, her face contorted in agony. Water and blood pooled beneath her chair. The twins, responding to stress, to the proximity of Marius's magic, to some trigger no one understood, had decided to be born. Now. Chaos erupted. Midwives rushed forward. Aurelia was carried toward her chambers, screaming that it was too early, too soon, the babies weren't ready. But nature, or something darker than nature, didn't care about readiness. Klaus and Julius stood frozen, watching the woman they'd both loved being taken away to give birth to children who might save or doom them all. We're out of time, Julius breathed. We were always out of time. Klaus turned to his assembled forces. Half of you prepare to march on the stronghold. The other half protect this castle. Protect the queen. Protect those children. Whatever happens, Marius Guerra doesn't get them. The vampires scrambled to obey. But as they organized, the castle itself shook, a tremor that ran through stone and earth, originating from somewhere far below. Clara's eyes widened. He knows. He knows they're being born. He's coming for them. And from the depths beneath Fenwick's stone barrow, something ancient began its ascent. Marius Guerra had waited 400 years for this moment, had manipulated bloodlines, orchestrated wars, planted prophecies, and watched them grow like seeds into precisely the harvest he required. He'd been patient, meticulous. And now, with the twins crowning into existence and the plague reaching its crescendo, his patience was rewarded. He emerged from tunnels no one knew existed, his body a horror that made even ancient vampires recoil. He'd been beautiful once, all vampires were, but centuries of forbidden magic had transformed him into something else. His skin was translucent, showing the dark magic that flowed through his veins instead of blood. His eyes burned with colors that had no names. His presence bent reality around him like heat shimmer. He stood at the base of Draventhorn Hollow, an army of plague-infected vampires at his back. Not dead, but twisted, turned into thralls by the same magic that sustained him. His voice, when he spoke, echoed through every vampire's mind simultaneously. Bring me the children. Bring me what is mine by right of creation. Or watch as I release the plague in its full fury, and your entire species burns to ash before dawn. Klaus and Julius appeared on the battlements, looking down at the nightmare made flesh. We don't negotiate with corpses who refuse to die, Klaus called out. Marius smiled, a terrible expression on that ruined face. But you will, because I know something you don't. The ritual doesn't require the children's death. It requires their blood, yes, their essence, certainly, but they can survive it. Give them to me, and I'll cure the plague. Refuse, and everyone dies, including them, eventually. So choose, brother kings, your pride or your species' survival. The lie was beautiful, perfectly calibrated to exploit their desperation, and everyone knew it was a lie. But what if it wasn't? From inside the castle, Aurelia's screams reached a crescendo, and then silence. A moment later, the thin, reedy cry of a newborn infant, then another. The twins had entered the world, and Marius Guerra's smile widened because everything, absolutely everything, was going exactly according to plan. The temple beneath Fenwick's stone barrow was older than memory, carved from living rock by hands that predated written history. Marius Guerra had claimed it centuries ago, transforming sacred ground into a monument to his ambition. Now it trembled with the clash of armies. Draventhorn soldiers and resistance fighters, fighting side by side for the first time, united against an enemy that threatened them all. Klaus and Julius led the charge through tunnels thick with dark magic. The plague-infected rose to meet them. Former vampires, twisted into thralls, their crystallized blood glowing through cracked skin, their movements jerky and wrong. They attacked without strategy or mercy, forcing allies to cut down what had once been friends, comrades, family. Keep pushing forward, Klaus roared, his sword singing through the darkness. Beside him, Julius moved with equal fury, their fighting styles complementing each other the way they had centuries ago when they'd trained together as brothers. Some muscle memory ran deeper than hatred. Above them, in a chamber, hastily fortified and warded, Aurelia lay on a makeshift bed, her body racked with contractions. Midwives worked frantically while Clara stood guard, her silver eyes tracking every shadow, every flicker of magic that might signal Marius breaking through their defenses. I can see him, Clara whispered. His thread is burning so bright it hurts to look at. He's coming. He's almost here. One midwife held up a small, bloody form, a boy, wailing his fury at being thrust into a world of violence and magic. The first child, Minutes later, a girl followed, smaller, but with a cry just as fierce. The twins. The prophecy made flesh. One bearing Klaus's pure bloodline, one carrying Julius's mixed heritage, both necessary, both impossibly fragile in a world determined to destroy them. Aurelia reached for them with trembling hands, pulling both infants to her chest, even as her body screamed for rest. "Hide them," she gasped. "Whatever happens, hide them." The wall exploded inward. Marius Guerra stepped through the rubble like death-given form. Up close, his transformation was even more horrifying. Skin translucent as smoke, veins pulsing with magic instead of blood, eyes that burned with colors that made Clara's gift recoil in pain. He moved with impossible grace, and behind him, the sounds of battle suddenly ceased. "Did you really think you could stop me?" His voice was silk over razors. "I've orchestrated this moment for 400 years. Every choice you made, every path you walked, I laid them all before you like stones across a river." Klaus and Julius burst into the chamber, weapons drawn, armor dented and bloodied. They took in the scene instantly, Marius standing over Aurelia and the twins, magic crackling around his fingers. "Step away from them," Klaus commanded. "Or what?" Marius smiled. "You'll kill me? You can't. I've transcended death, transcended weakness. I am what you all should have become if you weren't so limited by sentiment and fear." He moved before they could react, his hand shooting out to grasp the boy infant. The child's wail cut off as Marius's magic wrapped around him, drawing blood with invisible needles. The girl followed, plucked from Aurelia's weakening grip. "The ritual requires blood of rivals born," Marius intoned. Ancient words that made the very air shudder. Blood of purity and blood of change, shed under the dying light of an ending age. The children's blood flowed upward, defying gravity, spiraling around Marius in twin helixes of crimson and gold. The plague's pressure, that suffocating weight every vampire had felt for weeks, began to ease. The magic was working. But the children were dying. Klaus charged. Julius followed. Both brothers moved as one, but Marius swatted them aside with casual gestures, his power absolute within this consecrated space. They crashed into walls and didn't rise quickly enough. Aurelia watched her children's lives drain away, watched Marius ascend toward godhood on the backs of her babies, and something inside her shattered and reformed into diamond-hard clarity. The prophecy. She'd studied it obsessively, memorized every word, every nuance of translation, and now, dying herself, bleeding from childbirth, and broken by grief, she saw what everyone had missed. Blood of rivals born, sacrifice of the willing. Not the children's sacrifice, the mother's, someone who carried both bloodlines within her body, who'd loved both rivals, who could bridge the divide through willing surrender. "Stop," Aurelia said, her voice cutting through the ritual's crescendo. Marius paused, surprised. "You have no power here, Queen." "Don't I?" Aurelia pushed herself upright through sheer force of will. Blood streamed down her legs, but she ignored it, walking toward Marius on trembling feet. "You translated the prophecy wrong. Or maybe you translated it right but misunderstood it anyway. The children aren't the sacrifice, I am." Klaus struggled to his feet. "Aurelia, no! I carried them both," she continued, speaking to Marius but looking at Klaus, at Julius. "I hold Klaus's blood in one child and Julius's in the other. I've loved them both, chosen them both, and I willingly give everything to undo what you've done." She reached out and touched the spiraling blood, and her own life force joined it, but transformed it, changed the ritual's fundamental nature from taking to giving, from power to healing, from corruption to redemption. Marius's expression shifted from confidence to confusion to horror. No, no, this isn't, you can't. I can. Aurelia's smile was radiant even as light began to pour from her skin. Because love is stronger than ambition, connection is stronger than power, and sacrifice freely given breaks every chain. The magic detonated outward. The plague's presence shattered like glass, the dark miasma that had choked vampire territories for months evaporating in an instant. Marius screamed as his stolen power turned against him, the very immortality he'd fought for becoming a prison that collapsed inward, crushing him into nothing. Klaus caught Aurelia as she fell, Julius reaching them a heartbeat later. The twins, released from Marius's grip, lay breathing but unconscious. Clara scrambled to gather them, wrapping them in torn cloth, protecting them from the magic still crackling through the air. Both children are yours now, Aurelia whispered to Klaus, her voice fading. Love them both. See them as what they truly are. Not division, but unity. Aurelia, please. Klaus's composure cracked completely. Please don't leave. We can find another way. There is no other way. This was always how it had to end. She reached for Julius with her other hand. You were my heart's choice, but he was my first vow. Honor both. Build something better than what we had. Julius gripped her hand, tears streaming freely. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for using you for... You loved me. That was real. Everything else was just complications. Her breathing grew shallow. She looked at Clara, who knelt beside her with both infants cradled close. Keep showing them the truth, even when it hurts, especially then. Promise me. I promise, Clara sobbed. Aurelia's eyes closed. Her chest rose once more, then stilled. Above them, impossibly, sunlight began to filter through cracks in the ancient stone. The first dawn in Fenwick Stonebarrow's history touched the graveyard, and for the first time in centuries, it didn't burn the vampires who stood within its light. Klaus held his wife's body and wept. Julius knelt beside them, one hand on his brother's shoulder, the other covering his own face. Clara cradled the twins and watched the light spread, watched the plague's darkness finally, completely fade. They'd won. They'd survived. But the cost would echo through centuries. In the ruins of Marius's temple, surrounded by the dead and dying, two vampire kings learned what every mortal already knew: that victory and grief often wear the same face, and that love's greatest power is also its greatest price. The battle was over. The healing could begin. And Aurelia Bourbonese, Queen of Draventhorn Hollow, beloved of two rivals, mother of prophecy, rested in peace at last. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Your time, your attention, and your support truly mean the world to me. I appreciate every single one of you. Now tell me, what do you think happens next in this story? Drop your predictions in the comments. You never know, the next twist might come from your idea. And before you go, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more amazing stories. Let me know where in the world you're watching from too. I love seeing how far this family reaches. Once again, thank you. You're the real reason these stories keep coming to life.